Stay with me, because before this night was over, one unborn baby would stop breathing for 11 terrifying seconds, and a millionaire would begin losing everything he owned. Rain hammered the glass walls of the Hayes penthouse overlooking downtown Chicago, turning the city skyline into a blur of silver lights and distorted reflections. Inside, the music from the charity gala downstairs still echoed faintly through the private elevator shaft, while Amelia Carter Hayes stood barefoot on the cold marble floor, one hand supporting her 8-month pregnant stomach and the other gripping the kitchen island hard enough for her knuckles to turn white. Nathaniel Hayes loosened his tuxedo tie with sharp, impatient movements, his jaw tight, his expensive cufflinks glinting beneath the recessed lighting. At 39, Nathaniel carried the polished confidence of a man who had spent his entire life being obeyed. Billionaire investors admired him. Business magazines worshipped him. Reporters called him the golden face of American finance. But Amelia had learned something terrifying during the last year of their marriage. Men who smiled the brightest in public often became strangers behind closed doors. "You embarrassed me tonight," Nathaniel said coldly, pouring himself another drink. Ice clinked against crystal. "I was dizzy," Amelia whispered. "The baby, I'm tired of hearing about the baby." The words landed harder than the thunder outside. Amelia instinctively rested both hands over her stomach as little Grace shifted beneath her silk maternity gown. The baby had been unusually active all evening, almost as if she could feel the tension surrounding her mother. Amelia swallowed carefully. Her throat felt tight. "The doctor said my blood pressure is too high. I shouldn't have stayed at the gala that long." Nathaniel laughed once under his breath. Not amused. Annoyed. "Do you have any idea how humiliating it is watching my wife disappear during a charity auction while investors are trying to shake my hand?" Amelia stared at him across the massive white kitchen island. 6 years ago, she would have apologized immediately. 6 years ago, she would have blamed herself. But tonight felt different. Something inside her had finally become too exhausted to stay afraid. "I'm carrying your daughter, Nate." Silence. Rain battered the windows harder. Somewhere below the penthouse, a siren wailed through downtown traffic. Nathaniel slowly lifted his whiskey glass. "And everything in my life has gone wrong ever since." Amelia felt the words physically, like cold metal sliding beneath her ribs. Her breathing became shallow. "You don't mean that." But he didn't answer right away. That was worse. Nathaniel turned toward the dark city skyline, one hand resting against the marble counter while lightning flashed behind him. For a brief second, his reflection in the glass looked unfamiliar. Hollow. Cornered. Dangerous. "Do you know what they asked me tonight?" he said quietly. 3 different investors wanted to know why Hayes Capital suddenly moved assets overseas. Amelia froze. She had seen documents. Strange transfers. Hidden accounts. Phone calls that stopped when she entered the room. "Nathaniel, you should have stayed out of my office." Her stomach dropped. He knew. The secret phone hidden in her closet suddenly felt heavier than a brick even from 3 rooms away. Amelia took one careful step backward. "I wasn't spying on you." "Then why were you printing divorce papers?" The room seemed to tilt sideways. Thunder cracked directly above the building, rattling the floor-to-ceiling windows. Amelia's lips parted, but no sound came out. Nathaniel moved closer now. Calm. Too calm. That frightened her more than shouting ever could. "You really thought you could leave me?" he asked softly. "Take my daughter and disappear?" "Our daughter," Amelia whispered. "She deserves better than this." Something changed in Nathaniel's face then. Not rage exactly. Worse. Pride collapsing under pressure. The kind of silence that comes right before something irreversible happens. Amelia's heart monitor app connected to the baby sensor strapped beneath her dress suddenly beeped faster. Rapid. Uneven. Grace was in distress. Amelia instinctively stepped away again, her heel sliding slightly against the polished marble. "Nathaniel, please," then movement. Fast. A sharp sound. A stumble. The edge of the marble island rushed toward her vision before everything exploded into white pain and silence. Somewhere far away, the fetal monitor emitted one long, continuous tone. Flat. Amelia collapsed onto the floor beneath the chandelier light, her dark hair spreading across the marble like spilled ink while rain pounded against the penthouse windows hard enough to sound like applause. Nathaniel stood frozen beside her, breathing hard, staring. Blood slowly traced across the white marble beneath Amelia's temple. Then the monitor beeped once. Twice. Grace's heartbeat returned weak and uneven through the static. Nathaniel looked down at his unconscious wife, and for the first time that night, fear entered his eyes. Because by sunrise, the security footage would be missing, the media would call it an accident, and two brothers driving through the storm toward Chicago would begin a revenge that nobody in Nathaniel Hayes' world would survive. The first headline appeared online at 4:12 that morning. Billionaire investor Nathaniel Hayes rushed pregnant wife to hospital after tragic fall. By sunrise, every major news station in Chicago was replaying the same footage of Nathaniel stepping out of a black SUV beneath flashing emergency lights, rain soaking through his designer overcoat, while reporters shouted questions from behind police barriers. He looked devastated, exhausted, human. "My wife is fighting for her life," he told cameras with a trembling voice that sounded almost believable. "Please pray for Amelia and our daughter." Millions of people would watch that clip before noon. Thousands of comments praised him for staying by her side. One reporter even called him the picture of a devoted husband under unimaginable pressure. But inside St. Mary's Medical Center on the 18th floor, the truth felt very different. The intensive care unit smelled like antiseptic, coffee, and sleepless fear. White fluorescent lights reflected against polished tile, while machines beeped steadily behind glass walls. Amelia lay motionless beneath pale blue blankets, dark bruising hidden beneath hospital gowns and medical tape. A ventilator hissed quietly beside her bed. The baby monitor attached near her stomach produced soft, uneven rhythms every few seconds, enough to keep doctors concerned and hopeful at the same time. Nurse Danielle Brooks adjusted Amelia's intravenous line carefully while glancing toward the observation window. Nathaniel stood outside the room speaking to hospital administrators with the confidence of a man accustomed to controlling outcomes. Expensive lawyers had already arrived. Private security guarded the hallway. Even the hospital director seemed nervous around him. Danielle frowned slightly. In 12 years as an ICU nurse, she had learned to recognize genuine grief. Husbands who were terrified touched their wives constantly. They whispered. They cried when nobody watched. Nathaniel Hayes never entered the room for longer than 60 seconds at a time. He never touched Amelia's hand. Around 9:30 that morning, the elevator doors opened again with a metallic ding that echoed through the hallway. Two men stepped out carrying rainwater on dark wool coats and expressions sharp enough to cut through steel. Mason Carter walked first. Broad shoulders, military posture, short brown hair streaked with rain. At 37, the former Marine carried himself with the silent awareness of someone who had spent years surviving dangerous places. Beside him moved Caleb Carter, younger by 3 years but colder somehow, his detective badge clipped discreetly beneath his jacket near his waist. Nathaniel looked up immediately. For one brief second, real panic crossed his face before disappearing behind practiced composure. "Mason." "Caleb." His voice lowered carefully. "I was going to call you." Mason ignored him completely. His boots echoed across the polished hospital floor as he stopped outside Amelia's ICU room. Through the glass, he saw his little sister connected to machines beneath sterile white lights. Her blonde hair spread across the pillow while bruising darkened the side of her forehead. Mason stopped breathing for a moment. He still remembered teaching Amelia how to ride a bicycle in their Ohio neighborhood when she was 6 years old. She used to scrape her knees constantly because she never stopped trying after she fell. Now she looked fragile enough to disappear entirely beneath hospital blankets. Caleb stared at the medical chart clipped beside the door. His jaw tightened. "What happened?" Nathaniel answered too quickly. "She slipped." Silence. Heavy silence. Caleb slowly turned toward him. Detectives spent their careers studying hesitation, eye movement, timing. Nathaniel Hayes looked polished, controlled, but not innocent. "She slipped," Caleb repeated quietly. "In a penthouse with heated marble flooring designed to prevent accidents." Nathaniel's lawyer stepped forward immediately. "My client does not need to answer further questions right now." Mason finally looked at Nathaniel then. The hallway suddenly felt smaller. "You touched her," Mason said softly. "Not a question." Nathaniel held his stare. "Be careful what you accuse people of." Mason moved so fast the nearby security guards tensed immediately, but he stopped inches away from Nathaniel without raising his voice. Somehow that felt worse. "My sister used to call me every time thunder scared her when she was little," Mason said quietly. Last night there was a storm over the whole city, and somehow she ended up unconscious beside a marble counter while you walked away without a scratch. Nathaniel's face hardened. This is not the place. Caleb suddenly noticed something else. The surveillance camera mounted outside Amelia's room had a blinking red indicator light. Active recording. Hospital security footage. Timestamps. Visitors. Movements. Useful details. His detective instincts sharpened instantly, because people who lied in public usually made mistakes in private. Across the hallway, a television mounted near the waiting area replayed Nathaniel's press statement again while subtitles scrolled beneath his face. Devoted husband requests privacy during family tragedy. Mason stared at the screen for several long seconds before looking back through the ICU glass. Amelia remained motionless. Machines beeped steadily around her. Then something changed. Nurse Danielle stepped carefully from the room, holding Amelia's personal belongings sealed inside a clear plastic evidence bag. One item immediately caught Caleb's attention. A cracked white cell phone that definitely did not belong to Nathaniel Hayes. Danielle lowered her voice carefully. Your sister hid this inside the lining of her coat. Caleb exchanged a look with Mason. Outside, thunder rolled over Chicago again, while cameras downstairs continued broadcasting Nathaniel Hayes as a grieving husband to the entire country. But upstairs on the 18th floor, the first crack in his perfect story had finally appeared. Caleb did not open the hidden phone immediately. He waited until Nathaniel and his lawyers disappeared down the private elevator with television cameras following close behind like obedient shadows. Only then did he carry the cracked white cell phone into the hospital cafeteria, where the noise of vending machines and late-night nurses created enough cover for quiet conversations. Rain still streaked the windows overlooking downtown Chicago, turning the city lights into blurred ribbons of gold and blue. Mason sat across from him with untouched black coffee growing cold between his hands. Neither brother looked tired, even though both had been awake nearly 20 hours. Some kinds of fear erased exhaustion completely. Caleb placed the phone carefully on the metal table. This was not an accident. Mason stared at the cracked screen. I know. Caleb pressed the power button once. Nothing. Again. Still dead. Battery is gone. Mason leaned back slowly, rubbing one hand across his jaw. Amelia hated confrontation. Even as a kid. If she hit a second phone, she was terrified. Caleb nodded once. That bothered him most. Amelia Carter Hayes used to call their mother crying after sad movies. She apologized when other people stepped on her shoes. A woman like Amelia did not secretly collect evidence unless she believed nobody would save her in time. Upstairs, a fetal monitor beeped steadily through intensive care while doctors worked to stabilize Amelia and the baby hour by hour. Downstairs, the entire country was falling in love with Nathaniel Hayes. By noon, morning talk shows praised him for refusing to leave the hospital. Social media accounts posted edited videos of him wiping tears outside the emergency room entrance. One clip alone reached 4 million views in less than 6 hours. America loved powerful men who appeared vulnerable. But Caleb noticed details most people missed. Nathaniel never answered direct questions. He repeated prepared phrases exactly the same way every interview. His timeline changed twice. And according to police reports, the security system inside the penthouse malfunctioned precisely 11 minutes before Amelia was injured. 11 minutes. Too convenient. Caleb's own phone buzzed suddenly against the cafeteria table. Detective Ramirez. Chicago Police Department Internal Investigations. Caleb answered immediately. Talk to me. Ramirez lowered his voice. You were right about the deleted footage. Caleb sat forward instantly. How bad? Professional wipe. Remote access. Somebody knew exactly what they were doing. Mason's expression darkened across the table. Caleb asked the next question carefully. Can it be recovered? Silence for 2 seconds. Partially, Ramirez said. But there is something else. Caleb looked toward the rain-covered hospital windows. What? The system logs show somebody accessed the penthouse cameras remotely from inside Hayes Capital headquarters 37 minutes after Amelia arrived at the hospital. Mason's coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. Caleb's voice turned cold. Nathaniel was already at St. Mary's by then. Exactly. Another silence. Then Ramirez spoke lower. You need to move carefully. Somebody inside his company is helping him. The call ended. Mason leaned back slowly, his large hands folding together while storm clouds rolled beyond the skyline. So this was planned. Caleb nodded once. Or cleaned up afterward. Same result. Upstairs on the 18th floor, Nurse Danielle adjusted Amelia's blanket, while another contraction monitor traced soft, uneven lines across a glowing screen beside the bed. Baby Grace remained stable for now, but doctors still whispered words like swelling, oxygen levels, and possible emergency delivery outside the room when they thought nobody could hear them. Amelia remained unconscious beneath the soft mechanical rhythm of ventilators and intravenous pumps. Yet sometime after 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Danielle noticed something strange. Amelia's left hand twitched. Very small, barely visible. Danielle froze beside the bed. Amelia? No response. The monitor continued beeping steadily. Danielle leaned closer. Can you hear me? Another twitch. Then stillness. Danielle immediately paged the attending physician while trying to control the sudden rush of hope climbing into her chest. Because people in deep comas were not supposed to respond that quickly. Meanwhile, 40 floors above Michigan Avenue, Nathaniel Hayes stood inside his executive office staring at the Chicago skyline through massive glass windows, while Vanessa Blake paced nervously nearby in cream-colored heels and an oversized designer coat. Her perfectly styled blonde hair framed a face beginning to crack beneath pressure. The brothers are here, she whispered. Nathaniel remained silent. You said she would not survive the fall. His jaw tightened slightly. Lower your voice. Vanessa crossed her arms. Do you understand what happens if she wakes up? Nathaniel finally turned toward her then. Calm. Controlled. Dangerous in the way hurricanes looked calm from far away. Amelia does not remember anything. But even as he said it, his own confidence sounded thinner than before. Because hidden inside St. Mary's Hospital, doctors had just discovered increased neurological activity in Amelia's latest brain scan. Tiny signals. Weak responses. But enough to change everything. Back in the cafeteria, Caleb plugged Amelia's secret phone into a portable charger borrowed from hospital security. The cracked screen remained black for several long seconds. Then suddenly, the phone vibrated once against the metal table. Mason leaned forward immediately. The screen illuminated slowly beneath harsh cafeteria lights. One unread notification appeared across the background photo of Amelia, smiling softly beneath autumn leaves while holding her pregnant stomach with both hands. Scheduled upload pending. Caleb's stomach tightened instantly, because beneath the notification sat a video file already prepared for automatic release. Timestamped 3 days earlier. Title: If Anything Happens to Me. The cafeteria suddenly felt too small for oxygen. Caleb stared at the glowing screen while rain rattled against the hospital windows hard enough to sound like gravel thrown across glass. Mason leaned closer beside him, both brothers silent as Amelia's hidden phone continued charging on the metal table between untouched coffee cups and flickering fluorescent lights. The scheduled file remained frozen on the screen for 3 long seconds. If anything happens to me. Caleb finally tapped the notification. The phone requested a password. Mason exhaled slowly through his nose. Try Grace. Caleb typed the baby's name. Wrong. Mason looked toward the storm outside. Mom's birthday. Wrong again. Caleb rubbed one hand across his face, exhausted frustration creeping beneath his calm detective instincts. Amelia had always used simple passwords. Family dogs. Favorite songs. Childhood addresses. But this phone was different. Secret. Protected. Then Mason spoke quietly. Try the lake house. Caleb looked up immediately. Their family lake house in Michigan had been the one place Amelia always felt safe growing up. Summers on the dock. Bonfires. Fishing at sunrise with their father before he died. Caleb entered the cabin address number slowly. The screen unlocked instantly. Neither brother moved for a second. Then the phone opened into a gallery filled with hundreds of files organized by date. Photos, audio recordings, screenshots, financial documents. Caleb's stomach tightened as he scrolled. Amelia had been documenting her marriage for months, maybe longer. The first photo showed bruising hidden beneath the sleeve of a cream-colored sweater. The next displayed a shattered picture frame on hardwood flooring beside the caption, February 11th. He said I embarrassed him in front of investors. Another image revealed a pregnancy medication bottle cracked across a bathroom sink. Timestamp after timestamp. quiet evidence collected by a woman too frightened to trust anyone completely. Mason stared at the screen with growing horror. Jesus Christ. Caleb opened an audio recording dated 3 weeks earlier. Amelia's voice filled the cafeteria softly through the speaker, shaky and exhausted. If somebody finds this, I need you to know I tried to keep Grace safe. Nathaniel was not always like this. Or maybe I just stopped lying to myself. Mason lowered his eyes. Amelia continued speaking through static and distant thunder. He watches everything now? My phone, my bank account, my appointments. Yesterday, he said if I ever took his daughter away from him, nobody would ever find me. The recording ended. Silence settled heavily across the cafeteria table. Nearby nurses continued eating sandwiches and checking charts, completely unaware that a billionaire's perfect public image was collapsing file by file inside a cracked white cell phone. Caleb opened another folder labeled insurance. His detective instincts sharpened instantly. Multiple screenshots showed policy updates worth nearly $18 million. Beneficiary, Nathaniel Hayes. Recent changes finalized only 6 weeks earlier. Caleb looked up slowly. He increased the policy after Amelia got pregnant. Mason's jaw tightened hard enough to twitch. He was planning this. Before Caleb could answer, the phone buzzed suddenly with a new incoming notification. Unknown number. The message contained only 6 words. Did she tell them about Zurich? Caleb immediately sat straighter. What the hell is Zurich? Mason frowned. Swiss bank accounts? Caleb's mind was already racing ahead. Offshore money. Hidden transfers. The deleted penthouse footage. Suddenly Nathaniel's panic made more sense. Maybe this had started as financial fraud before turning into something worse. Caleb typed a quick response. Who is this? 3 dots appeared instantly, then disappeared. No answer. Across town, 38 floors above Michigan Avenue, Nathaniel Hayes stood alone inside his office watching CNBC replay footage of himself outside St. Mary's Hospital. The lower headline read, "Billionaire husband refuses to leave wife's side." He muted the television immediately. His reflection stared back from the dark glass windows overlooking Chicago, controlled on the outside, cracking underneath. His assistant entered quietly carrying a tablet. "Sir, investors are asking questions about the Zurich accounts." Nathaniel slowly closed his eyes. "Who leaked that?" "We do not know yet." Then another pause. "Also, hospital sources say Amelia showed possible neurological response this afternoon." Nathaniel turned sharply. Real fear flashed across his face again. Who confirmed that? Nobody publicly. But doctors requested additional scans. Thunder rolled outside while stock tickers crawled silently across muted television screens behind him. Nathaniel loosened his tie again, the same nervous habit he always had before losing control. Back at St. Mary's, Caleb continued scrolling through Amelia's files when one final video thumbnail caught his attention. Timestamped 4 days before the gala. Duration, 6 minutes, 42 seconds. Amelia appeared frozen in the preview image, sitting inside a parked car while rain slid down the windshield behind her. Her eyes looked swollen from crying. Caleb pressed play carefully. The video opened shakily as Amelia adjusted the phone camera toward her face. "If you are watching this," she whispered. Then something already went wrong. Her breathing trembled unevenly. "Nathaniel thinks I do not know about the debt, or the accounts overseas. But I found everything." She looked over her shoulder nervously before continuing. "Tomorrow night, he wants me at the gala no matter what my doctor says. He keeps talking about appearances, investors, reputation." Amelia wiped tears from beneath exhausted eyes. "I think he is scared of losing money. And scared people do terrible things." Mason stared at the screen without blinking. Amelia lowered her voice even more. "If anything happens to me, do not let him near Grace." The video ended abruptly. Silence returned once more. Then upstairs on the 18th floor, an alarm suddenly erupted from Amelia's ICU monitor, loud enough to echo through the entire hallway. Nurses sprinted toward her room while red emergency lights flashed above the door. And for the first time since arriving in Chicago, Mason Carter looked genuinely afraid. The alarm sound tore through the intensive care hallway sharp enough to freeze every conversation on the 18th floor. Red emergency lights flashed above Amelia's room while nurses rushed through the double doors carrying medication trays and portable equipment. Mason was already moving before the first doctor shouted instructions. His boots slammed against polished hospital floors as he reached the glass window outside the ICU room, both hands pressed flat against the cold surface while doctors surrounded his unconscious sister beneath harsh fluorescent lights. The fetal monitor beside Amelia's bed screamed in uneven bursts. One nurse adjusted oxygen levels while another checked the baby's heartbeat again and again with growing urgency. Caleb arrived seconds later, breathing hard from the stairwell. What happened? Mason never looked away from the room. I do not know. But Nurse Danielle knew something nobody else did yet. 10 minutes earlier, she had stepped away from Amelia's bedside for less than 90 seconds to retrieve updated medication orders from the nurse's station. When she returned, Nathaniel Hayes was standing alone inside Amelia's room despite strict ICU restrictions. He claimed he only wanted a private moment with his wife. Danielle almost believed him until she noticed the fetal monitor numbers dropping immediately after he left. Now doctors fought to stabilize both Amelia and the baby while Nathaniel stood 50 feet away, speaking calmly into his phone beside a vending machine as if nothing unusual had happened. Caleb noticed him instantly. Get security footage from this hallway, he said quietly. Mason finally turned toward Nathaniel, and for one dangerous second Caleb thought his brother might cross the hallway and drag the billionaire through the wall himself. But Mason stayed still. Marines learned long ago that losing control at the wrong moment destroyed missions. Caleb approached Danielle carefully. Tell me exactly what you saw. Danielle lowered her voice, glancing nervously toward Nathaniel. He was inside alone for maybe a minute. Maybe less. Did he touch anything? I do not know. But after he walked out, her heart rate crashed almost immediately. Caleb's jaw tightened. Did hospital cameras record him entering? Danielle hesitated. The hallway camera went offline for maintenance around the same time. Mason laughed once under his breath. Cold. Empty. Of course it did. Across the hallway, Nathaniel ended his call and slowly approached them wearing the same perfectly measured expression he used during investor meetings and televised interviews. How is she? Mason stepped forward immediately. Stay away from her. Several nearby nurses froze. Nathaniel lowered his voice. I understand you are upset. Upset? Mason stared at him under the cold hospital lighting. My sister is fighting for her life while cameras downstairs call you husband of the year. Nathaniel's face hardened slightly. Be careful. No, Mason replied softly. You should be careful. Thunder rolled outside again while rainwater crawled down the giant hospital windows overlooking Chicago. The entire city felt trapped beneath dark clouds and flashing lights. Then the ICU doors finally opened. Dr. Evelyn Hart stepped into the hallway, removing latex gloves slowly while exhaustion lined her face. The baby is stable again, she said carefully. Mason exhaled for what felt like the first time in minutes. But Dr. Hart was not finished. However, Amelia's neurological activity changed during the episode. Caleb looked up instantly. Changed how? The doctor hesitated. We observed increased response patterns. Nathaniel spoke too quickly. Meaning? Dr. Hart looked directly at him. Meaning your wife may be trying to wake up. Silence hit the hallway like a physical force. Even the distant beeping of hospital machines suddenly sounded louder. Nathaniel's expression froze for half a second before recovering. But Caleb saw it. Fear. Real fear. The kind men could not fake under pressure. Mason saw it too. Dr. Hart continued carefully. It is too early to predict outcomes. But this is the first significant neurological improvement we have seen. Nathaniel nodded slowly. That is wonderful news. Yet nobody believed his smile anymore. Not the doctors, not the nurses, and certainly not Amelia's brothers. 2 hours later, the storm finally weakened over Chicago, leaving the city slick with rain and flashing police reflections. Caleb sat alone inside his rental SUV parked across from St. Mary's while Amelia's secret phone illuminated the darkness inside the vehicle. He replayed her hidden recordings again, searching for details he missed earlier. Names, dates, patterns. Then one file caught his attention. Vanessa. Private. Caleb opened it immediately. The recording began with muffled music and clinking glasses somewhere inside an upscale restaurant. Amelia's voice whispered softly from far away. Recording started. Then another woman laughed sharply. Vanessa Blake. Nathaniel worries too much, she said. Once the baby comes, Amelia will be completely trapped anyway. A man's voice answered quietly. Nathaniel, lower your voice. Vanessa laughed again. Relax. Your wife barely notices anything anymore. Caleb's grip tightened around the steering wheel. The recording continued through static and restaurant noise. What about the Zurich accounts? Vanessa asked. If investors find out, Nathaniel interrupted instantly. Nobody is finding anything. Then silence for several seconds before Vanessa spoke again, lower this time. You promised me once this was over, we would disappear somewhere warm. Caleb stopped breathing. Nathaniel answered softly enough that Caleb almost missed it entirely. I know. The recording ended abruptly. Rainwater slid slowly across the SUV windshield, while downtown traffic reflected red and white beneath wet Chicago streets. Caleb stared at the dark hospital tower ahead. Because somewhere inside that building, Amelia Carter Hayes was beginning to wake up. And somewhere else in the city, a billionaire was realizing his perfect story might not survive the night. By the second night, St. Mary's Medical Center no longer felt like a hospital. It felt like a battlefield disguised beneath fluorescent lights and polished floors. Reporters crowded the entrance 24 hours a day, hoping for another glimpse of Nathaniel Hayes walking solemnly through sliding glass doors with security guards surrounding him like armor. Protesters had even begun gathering outside after rumors leaked online about Amelia's hidden recordings. Some carried signs demanding justice. Others defended Nathaniel completely. America had divided itself into teams before Amelia had even opened her eyes. Upstairs on the 18th floor, the tension thickened with every passing hour. Caleb sat alone inside the waiting lounge, scrolling through financial records recovered from Amelia's secret phone, while television screens mounted above the reception desk replayed stock market coverage. Hayes Capital stock had fallen 12% by closing bell. Analysts blamed investor panic over unconfirmed domestic controversy. Caleb almost laughed at the phrase. Domestic controversy. Such clean corporate language for a woman lying unconscious beneath life support, while her billionaire husband tried desperately to hold his empire together with television smiles and legal threats. Mason returned from the parking garage carrying cold takeout coffee and a folder thick with printed documents. You were right about Zurich, he said quietly. Caleb looked up instantly. Mason dropped the folder onto the table. Swiss banking records. Wire transfers. Shell corporations hidden behind fake consulting firms. Millions of dollars moved overseas over the last 8 months. Caleb flipped through pages carefully while nearby nurses whispered near vending machines. Nathaniel siphoned investor funds. Mason nodded once. And according to one of my contacts, federal auditors were already preparing an investigation before Amelia got hurt. Caleb leaned back slowly. Suddenly, everything connected together like shattered glass, forming a mirror. The pressure, the insurance increase, the desperation hidden behind Nathaniel's polished public image. He was not protecting wealth anymore. He was trying to survive collapse. If Amelia filed for divorce, Caleb said quietly, financial discovery would expose everything. Mason stared toward Amelia's ICU room through the glass hallway doors. So he needed control. Thunder no longer rolled outside, but Chicago still looked gray beneath heavy clouds and endless flashing cameras gathered below the hospital tower. Then Caleb's phone vibrated sharply. Detective Ramirez again. Caleb answered immediately. Tell me you found something useful. Ramirez sounded exhausted. Useful depends on your definition. Papers shuffled somewhere in the background. We recovered partial penthouse footage. Mason stepped closer instantly. How partial? Only 14 seconds survived before the deletion completed. Caleb stood up. Send it. 3 seconds later the video arrived. Caleb opened it immediately. Grainy black and white security footage filled the screen beneath a timestamp from Gala Night. Amelia appeared first, crossing the penthouse kitchen slowly with one hand protecting her pregnant stomach. Nathaniel followed seconds later. No audio, just movement beneath security camera glare. Amelia stepped backward suddenly. Nathaniel moved forward fast enough to blur. Then the footage froze completely before cutting to static. 14 seconds. But enough. More than enough. Mason stared at the frozen image of Nathaniel lunging toward his sister. His expression became terrifyingly calm. That is attempted murder. Caleb nodded slowly. And now we can prove he lied. Across town, Nathaniel Hayes sat inside his penthouse office watching the same stock numbers collapse across financial news networks while half-empty whiskey glasses crowded the marble desk beside him. Vanessa Blake paced near the windows wrapped in a cream cashmere coat despite the warm room temperature. You said the footage was gone. Nathaniel loosened his tie again. Most of it is. Vanessa crossed her arms tightly. Most is not enough. Nathaniel slammed his glass onto the desk hard enough to spill amber liquid across financial reports. Do you think I do not understand that? Silence crashed through the penthouse. Somewhere below, Chicago traffic echoed faintly between skyscrapers. Vanessa lowered her voice carefully. Then fix it before she wakes up. Nathaniel stared at her. Not with love. Not even with trust anymore. Just calculation. Fear changed people quickly. Doctors still do not know if she remembers anything, he said finally. Vanessa laughed once under her breath. You really believe that matters? Public opinion already smells blood. Nathaniel looked toward the dark skyline outside his windows. Millions of dollars disappearing every hour. Federal investigations circling closer. Investors panicking. And somewhere inside St. Mary's Hospital, Amelia Carter Hayes refusing to die despite every prediction. Back upstairs in the ICU, Nurse Danielle adjusted Amelia's blanket while soft machine rhythms filled the dim room. The lights had been lowered for the evening shift, casting pale blue shadows across the walls. Amelia remained still except for the faint rise and fall of assisted breathing. Yet shortly after midnight, Danielle noticed something again. Amelia's fingers moved against the blanket. Deliberate this time. Danielle stepped closer immediately. Amelia? Very slowly, painfully, Amelia's eyelids twitched beneath the hospital lighting. Danielle felt her pulse spike. Dr. Hart, she called quietly into the hallway. Now. Footsteps rushed toward the room, while monitors continued their steady electronic heartbeat through the darkness. Outside the ICU window, Mason and Caleb stood simultaneously as doctors hurried past them. Neither brother spoke. Neither breathed. Then through the narrow opening between doctors moving around the bed, Mason saw it. Amelia's eyes opening for the first time since gala night. Weak, confused, terrified, but awake. And the first word she tried to whisper through cracked lips was not help. It was Nathaniel. The room fell completely silent after Amelia whispered Nathaniel's name. Even the machines surrounding her bed seemed quieter for one suspended second beneath the pale blue ICU lights. Dr. Evelyn Hart leaned closer immediately while nurses adjusted monitors and intravenous lines around the hospital bed. Amelia's eyes fluttered weakly, unfocused at first, then slowly tracking movement through the room as confusion and fear surfaced together across her exhausted face. Mason stepped toward the doorway instinctively, but Caleb caught his arm before he could enter. Let the doctors work. Mason's chest rose heavily beneath his dark jacket. He had spent 2 nights preparing himself for grief. He had not prepared himself for hope. Inside the room, Amelia tried to speak again, but the ventilator tubing and dryness in her throat turned words into fractured whispers. Dr. Hart touched her shoulder gently. You are safe, Amelia. Do you understand me? Amelia blinked once. Slow, weak, but aware. The fetal monitor beside her stomach continued its steady rhythm, while rainwater still traced silver lines down the hospital windows overlooking downtown Chicago. Somewhere below, reporters remained camped outside St. Mary's waiting for updates that could move stock markets and flood social media timelines within seconds. Upstairs, nobody cared about cameras anymore. Amelia's eyes shifted nervously around the room until they landed on the hallway window. Mason stood there motionless beneath the fluorescent lights. Her older brother. The same protective expression he wore when she scraped her knees as a child. Amelia's lips trembled immediately. Mason felt something crack inside his chest. Dr. Hart finally nodded toward the door. 1 minute only. Mason entered slowly, almost afraid the moment would disappear if he moved too quickly. Hospital machines hummed softly around them, while Amelia stared at him through tear-filled eyes. Mason took her hand carefully, mindful of the wires attached to fragile skin. Hey, kid. Amelia tried to smile, but emotion collapsed the effort halfway through. Tears slid silently into her hairline instead. Mason swallowed hard. You scared us. Her breathing shook unevenly. Grace. Mason glanced toward the monitor. She is okay. Fighting already. Amelia closed her eyes briefly in relief. But the moment peace touched her face, fear followed immediately afterward. Sharp. Visible. Real. Her fingers tightened weakly around Mason's hand. He knows, she whispered. Mason leaned closer. Who? Amelia's voice cracked. Nathaniel. The name barely escaped her throat. He knows about the files. Mason's expression darkened instantly. Listen to me carefully. Caleb has everything now. The recordings. The accounts. You do not have to protect him anymore. Amelia's entire body tensed beneath the blankets. No, you do not understand. Dr. Hart glanced toward the hallway uneasily as Amelia struggled to breathe through rising panic. He said if I ever tried leaving, her voice failed completely. Mason gently squeezed her hand. You are safe now. But Amelia looked past him toward the ICU doorway, as if expecting Nathaniel to appear there at any second. Trauma did not disappear just because someone survived. Sometimes survival made fear worse. Meanwhile, 40 floors away inside Hayes' Capitol headquarters, Nathaniel Hayes stood alone in the executive conference room, watching rain clouds break apart above Chicago through floor-to-ceiling glass. Morning sunlight finally touched the skyline after 2 straight days of storms, but the city looked colder somehow. His phone vibrated continuously across the polished table. Investors, lawyers, journalists, federal auditors. He ignored all of them. Then Vanessa Blake entered carrying a tablet with trembling hands. She woke up. Nathaniel froze completely. Who confirmed it? Hospital staff leaked it 20 minutes ago. Social media already knows. Nathaniel grabbed the tablet immediately. News alerts flooded every financial network. Amelia Hayes conscious after critical injury. Questions grow around billionaire husband. Stock numbers bled red beneath the headlines. Another 12% gone before market open. Vanessa lowered her voice carefully. We need to leave. Nathaniel stared at the screen without blinking. Leaving makes me guilty. Nathaniel. No, he set the tablet down slowly. Calm returning in the dangerous way calm returns before hurricanes make landfall. If Amelia talks publicly before I control this, he never finished the sentence. He did not need to. Across the city, Caleb sat inside a temporary FBI field office reviewing recovered Zurich account transfers with Detective Ramirez and 2 federal investigators who now looked significantly less skeptical than 48 hours earlier. One investigator pushed a folder across the table. Hayes Capital moved nearly $80 million offshore through shell corporations tied to Switzerland and the Cayman Islands. Caleb flipped through the pages carefully. Fraud. Looks worse than fraud. Another investigator adjusted his glasses. It looks like collapse. Caleb thought about Amelia lying unconscious for 2 days while Nathaniel smiled for cameras downstairs. He thought about the insurance policy increase, the deleted footage, the fear in Amelia's eyes moments after waking up. Then his phone buzzed sharply across the conference table. Mason. Caleb answered immediately. Talk to me. Mason sounded tense. Amelia remembers more than we thought. Caleb stood instantly. How much? Silence for 1 second. Then Mason answered quietly. She says Nathaniel knew the FBI was coming before the gala. Caleb's stomach dropped. But Mason was not finished. And Caleb, she says somebody inside the hospital is helping him. The feeling of being watched settled over the 18th floor like a second layer of hospital air. Cold. Invisible. Constant. After Amelia warned them that somebody inside St. Mary's was helping Nathaniel, Caleb stopped trusting everything around them. Nurses. Security guards. Cleaning crews. Even the blinking cameras mounted above the hallways suddenly felt hostile beneath the fluorescent lighting. By sunrise, 2 FBI agents had quietly stationed themselves outside Amelia's ICU room, while Caleb reviewed employee access logs inside a temporary office near the surgical wing. Every visitor badge, every elevator scan, every security override. He studied the data with the patience of a homicide detective building a timeline 1 missing minute at a time. Then finally, something appeared. At 1:13 that morning, just 17 minutes before Amelia's monitors crashed, a temporary pharmacy access card had entered the ICU wing using stolen credentials. Caleb zoomed in on the name attached to the badge. Lauren Pike, contract nurse, hired 3 weeks earlier through a private staffing agency connected to Hayes Capital Health Investments. Caleb stared at the screen for several seconds without blinking. Found you. Upstairs. Amelia remained awake but fragile. The swelling in her brain had decreased enough for short conversations, though every memory exhausted her visibly. Morning sunlight filtered weakly through the hospital windows while Mason sat beside her bed, reading quietly from a notebook where he had written down every detail she remembered. Amelia's voice remained rough from the ventilator tube. The gala was supposed to calm investors, she whispered. Nathaniel kept saying if the board stayed confident another week, he could move the rest of the money before auditors froze everything. Mason listened silently. Amelia closed her eyes briefly. He stopped sleeping around February, started drinking more, talking to himself. Her fingers tightened weakly around the blanket. One night I heard him say my insurance policy number out loud while he thought I was asleep. Mason felt rage crawl slowly beneath his ribs, but he kept his expression steady for her. Amelia looked toward the ICU doorway nervously again. He always finds people willing to help him. Not anymore, Mason said quietly. But deep down, he knew power like Nathaniel's rarely collapsed cleanly. Wolf bought silence, fear, loyalty, especially when millions of dollars were still missing. Meanwhile, downtown, media pressure had reached a boiling point. Protesters crowded outside Hayes' Capitol headquarters carrying signs demanding arrests, while financial analysts openly discussed criminal fraud investigations during live television broadcasts. One commentator called it the fastest public collapse of a billionaire reputation since the Enron era. Nathaniel watched all of it from his penthouse office with bloodshot eyes and untouched coffee growing cold beside stacks of legal paperwork. Every hour brought another disaster. Investors filed emergency lawsuits. Federal subpoenas arrived before noon. And now Amelia was awake. Vanessa Blake entered quietly wearing oversized sunglasses despite the cloudy morning outside. We need to disappear. Nathaniel never looked up from the television. Running confirms guilt. Vanessa laughed nervously. Nathaniel, they already think you tried to kill your wife. He muted the television slowly. Think is not proof. Vanessa lowered her voice. And if Amelia talks publicly? Nathaniel finally turned toward her then. Calm again. Too calm. Then I remind everyone she suffered brain trauma. Vanessa froze. You are going to say she imagined it? I am going to say she is confused. Outside the penthouse windows, helicopters circled above downtown Chicago while sirens echoed faintly through the streets below. Nathaniel loosened his tie once more, but his hands shook slightly now. Even he could feel the walls closing in. Back at St. Mary's, Caleb confronted Lauren Pike inside a narrow administrative hallway near the pharmacy wing just after noon. The young nurse nearly dropped her clipboard when she saw his badge. Detective Carter. Caleb closed the hallway door behind them softly. You accessed Amelia Hayes' ICU wing last night using stolen credentials. Lauren's face drained of color instantly. I can explain. Good. Caleb stepped closer. Because federal agents are already reviewing your bank records. Tears filled Lauren's eyes almost immediately. I never wanted anybody hurt. Caleb's voice remained ice cold. Then start talking. Lauren collapsed into the nearest chair, trembling visibly beneath harsh fluorescent lights. A man from Hayes Capital contacted me 3 days ago, she whispered. He offered $50,000 if I updated somebody about Amelia's condition. Caleb's jaw tightened. Somebody. Lauren nodded weakly. Nathaniel Hayes. Silence. Heavy. Final. Lauren wiped tears quickly. Last night he wanted to know if Amelia was improving neurologically. That is all I knew. Caleb leaned closer. And the monitor crash? Lauren shook her head violently. I swear I did not touch anything. I only disabled the hallway camera for privacy because he said reporters were trying to sneak upstairs. Caleb studied her carefully. Fear looked genuine. Panic too messy to fake. Then Lauren whispered something else. But there was another man. Caleb froze. What man? Tall. Dark coat. Expensive watch. Lauren swallowed hard. He came out of Amelia's room right before the alarm started. Caleb's pulse quickened instantly. Did you recognize him? Lauren shook her head. No, but he was not hospital staff. Upstairs in the ICU, Amelia suddenly became restless again beneath soft monitor lights. Her breathing quickened while she stared toward the television mounted silently in the corner of the room. Breaking news banners flashed across every channel. FBI expands investigation into Hayes Capital. Then another headline appeared beneath it moments later. Anonymous source claims more evidence exists against billionaire investor. Amelia's face went pale immediately. Mason noticed at once. What is wrong? Amelia's lips trembled. The storage locker. Mason leaned closer. What storage locker? Amelia looked terrified now. Nathaniel does not know I copied everything before the gala. Mason's heartbeat slowed dangerously. Everything. Amelia nodded once. Weak, but certain. And if he realizes I am awake, he will try to find it before the FBI does. The storage locker sat beneath an old commuter station on the north side of Chicago where nobody looked twice at rusted metal doors and flickering fluorescent lights. Caleb arrived just after sunset with 2 FBI agents while cold wind pushed newspaper scraps across the empty parking lot outside. Mason stayed behind at St. Mary's beside Amelia because neither brother trusted leaving her alone anymore. Not after the hallway cameras. Not after the mysterious man leaving her room. Not after seeing genuine fear in her eyes every time Nathaniel's name was spoken aloud. Caleb unlocked the storage unit using the key hidden inside Amelia's wallet beneath a folded ultrasound photo of baby Grace. The metal door groaned upward, slowly revealing stacks of plain cardboard boxes arranged with careful precision. Caleb stared silently for several seconds. Amelia had not merely prepared to leave Nathaniel. She had prepared for war. Inside the boxes sat printed bank transfers, offshore account numbers, investor communications, secret recordings, insurance documents, and hard drives labeled by date. One folder carried a handwritten note in Amelia's careful script. If anything happens to me, give this to the FBI. Caleb exhaled slowly while one federal agent opened a laptop beside him. This is enough to bury him. But the biggest discovery waited at the bottom of the final box. A black flash drive labeled Zurich Master Ledger. Caleb plugged it into the laptop immediately. Rows of encrypted transactions filled the screen connected to shell corporations stretching from Switzerland to Singapore to the Cayman Islands. $80 million had become $120 million through hidden transfers and manipulated investor accounts. But one line froze Caleb completely. Emergency liquidation scheduled for tomorrow morning. Time remaining, 14 hours. Nathaniel was planning to move the last of the money before federal seizure orders arrived. Caleb grabbed his phone instantly. Ramirez, get warrants moving now. He is trying to run. Across downtown Chicago, Hayes Capital headquarters glowed against the dark skyline, while television trucks crowded the streets below like vultures waiting for collapse. Nathaniel stood alone inside the executive boardroom, watching investors scream through muted video calls projected across giant screens. Every face looked terrified, angry, betrayed. His empire was bleeding publicly now. 3 board members had resigned before dinner. Federal subpoenas had frozen multiple accounts. And somewhere inside St. Mary's Hospital, Amelia Carter Hayes was alive long enough to destroy everything he built. Then his private phone rang. Unknown number. Nathaniel answered cautiously. What? A nervous male voice whispered immediately. The FBI found the storage unit. Nathaniel's face drained of color. How much did they recover? Everything. Silence swallowed the boardroom. Nathaniel slowly loosened his tie again, while Chicago traffic lights reflected against the glass walls around him like warning flares. Get the jet ready, he said quietly. Tonight. But outside the building, unmarked federal vehicles were already sliding silently into position beneath the rain-soaked streets. Back at St. Mary's, Amelia lay awake beneath dim ICU lighting, while Mason sat beside her reading updates from Caleb through encrypted messages. Baby Grace's heartbeat sounded stronger now through the monitor beside the bed, steady enough that doctors finally allowed themselves cautious optimism. Amelia looked exhausted but clearer somehow, as if surviving the coma had burned away months of fear. Mason studied her carefully. Caleb found the locker. Amelia closed her eyes slowly. Relief. Real relief. Then it is over. Mason almost answered yes. But soldiers learned long ago that dangerous men rarely surrendered quietly. Before he could speak, the television mounted silently in the corner suddenly changed to breaking news coverage. Reporters crowded outside Hayes Capital while flashing lights painted the wet streets blue and red. Federal agents arrive at Billionaire headquarters. Amelia stared at the screen without blinking. Then another image appeared live from downtown. Nathaniel Hayes exiting the building surrounded by lawyers and security guards, his expensive overcoat hanging open against the cold wind while cameras exploded with shouted questions. Mr. Hayes, did you attack your wife? Are you fleeing the country? Did you steal investor funds? Nathaniel ignored all of them until one reporter shouted something different. Amelia Hayes is awake. Did she lie about you? Nathaniel stopped walking for half a second. Just long enough for every camera in Chicago to capture the panic crossing his face. Then federal agents stepped forward through the crowd. Badges, jackets, search warrants. The city seemed to stop breathing. Upstairs in the ICU room, Amelia watched silently while the television volume increased automatically. A federal agent approached Nathaniel beneath the flashing streetlights and spoke words millions of Americans would replay online for weeks afterward. Nathaniel Hayes, you are under arrest for federal financial crimes, obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and attempted homicide investigation pending further review. Reporters erupted instantly. Camera flashes turned the rainy Chicago street white. Nathaniel looked around wildly, as if searching for exits that no longer existed. Then his eyes lifted toward the hospital tower, visible several blocks away through the storm. For one brief second, Amelia thought he looked smaller somehow. Not powerful, not untouchable, just alone. Mason lowered the television volume quietly, while federal agents escorted Nathaniel toward a black SUV beneath screaming reporters and flashing lights. Amelia stared at the screen until the vehicles disappeared into downtown traffic. Then finally, after days of fear and machines and rain and whispered threats, she looked toward the bassinet beside her hospital bed, where baby Grace slept beneath soft pink blankets after an emergency delivery doctors once feared neither of them would survive. Amelia reached out with trembling fingers, touching her daughter's tiny hand for the first time. No cameras captured the moment. No reporters saw it. Just the soft beep of hospital monitors beneath dim lights, while snow began falling quietly outside the Chicago skyline. And somewhere downtown inside a cold federal holding cell, Nathaniel Hayes still had millions of dollars connected to his name. But nobody answered his calls anymore.